Привет, друзья, and welcome to my channel Start Russian. And in today's video, we'll talk about a very simple topic, which is forming plurals for Russian nouns. So in English, for example, putting nouns in the plural is very simple. You simply add letter S. And the good news is that in Russian, it's very similar. We simply add a letter or a couple of letters to put nouns in the plural, for most nouns anyway. And those letters in Russian are y and I. For example, banan, banana, in the plural would be banаны. Машина, a car, in the plural would be машины. And for example, книга, a book, in the plural would be книги. And a little note here, if your noun actually ends in a vowel, then you don't literally add y or I to it, but rather you replace that vowel with y or I. For example, banan ends in a consonant, so you literally add y to it, banаны. But машина ends in an a, which is a vowel, so to say cars, to put it in the plural, you replace a with y. So машина becomes машины, cars. Now, the question is, when is it actually an y and when is it an I? And we actually have a rule. So you always put an y in the plural unless the last consonant in your noun is one of these 7 consonants. K, G, H, J, Sh, Ch, Sh. And at first glance, these 7 letters seem pretty random, but actually they're quite easy to memorize. So the first 3 are pronounced in the same part of your mouth, like at the back of your throat. K, G, H. And then the last 4 are those weird hissing consonants, right? Zh, sh, ch, sh. So let's look at a couple of examples. For example, banan, right? What's the last consonant in the word banan? It's N. And N is not on that list of 7. So to form the plural for banan, we apply y. So bananas is again banany. But in the word kniga, for example, a book, right? The last consonant is g, which is on that list. So books would not be knigy, but rather knigi. And one other scenario when you would apply I and not y is when your noun ends in a soft consonant. In other words, it would be the soft sign. And the reason for it is because phonetically, I, the backwards N, is a softening vowel, whereas y is not. So when your noun ends in a soft consonant or the soft sign, when you're forming the plural, you want to keep that consonant soft. For example, in the word отель, a hotel, L is soft, it's softened by the soft sign. So when you put it in the plural, even though L is not on that list of the 7 consonants, right, that would require an E in the plural, but still you would apply an E because you want to keep the L soft. And if you apply the y, then it will be ately, which again sounds very unnatural to a native speaker. Again, you want to keep it soft. So to say hotels, you would say ateli. You apply the e because it keeps the L soft. But as I usually tell my students, it's really not a big deal if you, when forming the plural, apply y as opposed to an e or the other way around. Because likely as Russian learners, you have an accent, and most likely, even if you apply the wrong letter, we Russian native speakers would probably just assume it's your accent, because the 2 letters are quite similar anyway, right? Y and I, they're similar vowels, so even if you happen to apply the wrong one, it's really not a big deal. We'll still understand you're forming the plural. And again, we might just think it's your accent. Just say y or I or something in between and you'll be fine. Now, more importantly, there are certain Russian nouns that do not take either y or I in the plural. And that's important to know. I'd say about 10 to 15% of Russian nouns don't, which you will probably agree is a pretty big chunk of noun. And that would simply be all neuter nouns in Russian. So remember guys, all neuter Russian nouns, instead of y or I, in the plural, take a or ya. And a quick reminder, how do you know a noun is neuter in Russian? It ends in either o or ye. Let's look at a few examples. Окно, window. Окна, windows. Облако, cloud. Облака, clouds. Здание, building. Здания, buildings. Море, sea. Моря, seas. Again, guys, all neuter nouns take a or ya. And there's only one exception that I can think of, and that word is яблоко, apple. Despite being a neuter noun, in the plural, it takes a regular plural ending, which is e. So apples is яблоки. And when is it an a versus ya? Very easy. If your noun ends in a diphthong, for example, ye, like in the word здание, it has that y sound, right? So you would want to keep it in the plural. That's why in the plural, buildings would be здания, not здания, but здания. Or also, if your noun has a soft consonant at the end, for example, море, the sea, right? R is softened by ye, море. So you want to keep it soft. In the plural, you would say моря. Because again, ya phonetically is a softening vowel, whereas a is not. And finally, let's talk about some irregular plurals. So first of all, there are some masculine nouns that also take a or ya in the plural, even though obviously they're not neuter. So again, if a neuter noun takes an a or ya in the plural, it's not considered irregular because all neuter nouns, except for яблоко, take a or ya in the plural. But if it's a masculine noun, then I consider it irregular. So let's look at a few common masculine nouns that take a or ya in the plural. Дом, house or home, right? A super common noun. In the plural actually is дома. Глаз, eye. In the plural, глаза. Город, city. In the plural, города. Вечер, evening. In the plural, вечера, evenings. Поезд, train. Поезда, trains. Паспорт, passport. Паспорта. And a few common professions. Доктор, доктора. Учитель, teacher. Учителя. Профессор, профессора. And, for example, директор, director, директора. And finally, there are a few nouns that I recommend you memorize that have completely irregular, weird plural forms. Repeat them with me and try to memorize them. Друг, friend. Друзья, friends. Брат, brother. Братья, brothers. Сестра, sister. Сестры, sisters. Сын, son. Сыновья. Дочь, daughter. Дочери. So some family words, as you can see. And then стул, chair. Plural is стулья, chairs. Which is weird because stol, which is almost the same word, in the plural would be a regular form. Столы, tables. But stool, chair, is стулья. And then there are also a couple of words that surprisingly have similar irregularities in English, even though Russian and English are not exactly close relatives. So one of those words is человек, a person or a human. In the plural, it would be a completely different word, люди, people. So don't try to say человеки or anything like that. That's not a word. And finally, the word for child, in Russian it's ребенок. In the plural would be дети, children. In English, child and children are not quite as different, right? But children is still an irregular form. In Russian, it's quite a bit more irregular, right? So again, remember, one kid or child is ребенок, but then technically you cannot say ребенки, ребенки, that's not a word. You must say дети. And likewise, дети does not have a singular. You cannot say деть or anything like that. That's not a word. So the singular of дети is ребенок, a child or a kid. Alright guys, this is all I have for you in this video. If you liked it, be sure to give it a like and of course subscribe to my channel, Start Russian. If you guys have any questions or any requests for topics that you would like covered on this channel, please let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. And until then, пока-пока.